Greetings. On occasion, I like to look at the Hebrew calendar to see what the weekly Torah reading is for Rabbinic Judaism. So we're looking at a Hebrew calendar. Here you see April 2020, April 2020, April 2020, and this year that corresponds to the months of Nisan and Iyar, right? It overlaps between those 2 months. And today's date is the 18th of April, and I'll zoom in on the specific date here, which corresponds to the 24th of Nisan. And the reading for this day, or at least it was before the sun went down, was Shmini, Parshat Shmini. That's the weekly Torah portion. And so turning to my library, I wanted to go to Mikrot Gedolot, which is like a rabbinic study Bible. And Parshat Shmini is in Leviticus, or Vayikra, as you see here. So I'm going to take my copy of Mikrot Gedolot to Leviticus, to Vayikra, off the shelf here. And I'm going to open it up to Parshat Shmini. And I'm doing this because I wanted to show something interesting that I found in the text today. So you see here, Parshat Shmini. It's based on the opening of Leviticus 9:11, which says, Vayehi Bayom Hashmini, and it was on the 8th day. And it starts, as I said, at Leviticus 9, and it goes through the 10th and 11th chapters of Leviticus. And I was looking at this earlier. I'm going to turn to the 11th chapter here, if you bear with me for a second. But yeah, I was looking at this earlier, and I found some stuff that I wanted to discuss. So here we are in the 11th chapter, but I'm going to jump ahead to the 18th verse, and I'm specifically going to look at the commentary of Rashi, who I found it quite interesting looking at this today, and I thought I'd make a quick video discussing it. So here's Rashi, and that refers to a Rabbinic Jewish commentator, perhaps one of the most authoritative commentators within Rabbinic Judaism, who lived in northern France in the 11th century and died at the very beginning of the 12th century. And his actual name and title was Rabbi Shlomo Yitzhaki. And the name Rashi is based on the first letters of that title and name. If you create an acronym, which is Rashi, Resh, Shin, Yod. And since, at least as far back as the 15th century, his writings, printed editions of his writings, have mostly been written in a script, a Sephardic script that's now called the Rashi script, Ketav Rashi. And I don't know if he himself ever wrote in the script which bears his name, but apparently that was the script that was chosen for commentaries on the Bible to be printed in back in the late medieval period. So if you're following along, you might notice that the script I'm going to be pointing to in this video, when I'm pointing to Rashi's commentary, is a little strange. But anyway, the reason why I wanted to discuss Rashi today is because while I was looking at the weekly Torah reading that was read in synagogues on the Sabbath today before the sun went down, in the 11th chapter of Leviticus, there's a number of places where Rashi transcribes or transliterates French words, old French words, into the Hebrew script, because he was writing his commentary for a Hebrew reading community, a relatively, as presumably educated group of Jews in northern France, but there was a number of words that they weren't familiar with, and so on a number of occasions he would attempt to explain a word by giving its French equivalent, or at least the equivalent in the form of French that he spoke in northern France, 900 years ago or something like that, And so I thought it would be fun to look at some of the French words that appear in his commentary. Now, French words appear all over his commentaries, but in the case of today's readings, a number of words appeared specifically on his commentary on Leviticus 11. In fact, within a span of 3 or 4 verses, there were a few different fun examples, which I'd like to look at. So the first verse I'm going to look at is Leviticus 11:18, looking at the word tinshemet. So you see it here, tinshemet. Most translations today render it like owl or something like that. I think the King James rendered it swan, but Rashi thought it referred to a bat. He described it as like a flying mouse, but then he transliterates the French equivalent here, and those what look like apostrophe marks are gershayim. They often appear in acronyms, like in Rashi itself, but here they're used to signify foreign words. So here at the top of your screen, I put his transliteration, his attempt to transcribe that French phrase into the Hebrew script. Now again, when Rashi would transcribe or transliterate French words or French phrases, he did this for his immediate audience, his primary audience, which was a collection of apparently educated Jews living in northern France who could read Hebrew but also apparently knew French. And so there were times where he would use French words and French phrases to elucidate a concept, and that's what he did here. But as we look at this phrase, it raises the question, what exactly is he trying to transcribe here? Sometimes with the aleph, there's an open question as to whether it should be pronounced or ah in his usage. So too with the wa or vav, as they say in modern Israeli Hebrew, it's unclear sometimes if he means it as a o sound or an u sound. But nonetheless, in this case, it's fairly clear he was trying to write something along the lines of calve soris. Emphasis on that last consonant. He used the sade, so it's an emphatic S, so calve soris. So this is interesting because this is, again, the way he would say bat, his equivalent of bat in the form of French that he spoke, in northern France 900 years ago. Now, I'm not particularly familiar with French, but nonetheless, I am aware that the modern equivalent, the modern French word for bat or French phrase for bat is chauve-souris. And that's why I find this interesting, because this medieval transliteration of a French phrase captures this much older pronunciation. You can see the difference between chauve-souris and calve soris. For starters, the CH in French is pronounced sh, but there's a lot of words that start with those two letters, yet those words descend from, for example, Latin words which were pronounced, where it was pronounced more like k. And what we see is in this older form of French, the first phoneme was pronounced ka rather than sha. So too, a lot of French words, maybe most French words, they have these silent final letters. You don't pronounce the final letter, but we can clearly see from this transliteration that not only was the final consonant pronounced, but it was pronounced in an emphatic way, which is why he transliterated it with a tsade, calve soris. And just to be clear, I should note the etymology for this French phrase, chauve-souris. It comes from a Latin phrase, calva sorex. So Rashi's transliteration captures a 900-year-old pronunciation, which was closer to the Latin from which the phrase came. Okay, so I'd like to move on from that to the next verse, Leviticus 11:19, verse 19 of the chapter. And the first animal mentioned is this word hasida, which means stork. That's all the translations pretty much agree on that, and Rashi agreed on that. And here's Rashi's commentary on hasida, and here's the word that this is how he transcribed it in French. Here's his attempt to transcribe the French word, the French equivalent, into Hebrew script. And of course, just like last time, I'll put the word at the top of your screen. This is his transcription of the French word. And in this case, the pronunciation is fairly simple. It's cigogne. Maybe it might have been cigogne, but most likely cigogne. And his use of the aleph here at the end is not superfluous. He's using it because that last syllable is pronounced. So it's not cigogne, it's cigogne. Meanwhile, the modern French equivalent is cigogne. And again, the last letter is practically silent, while from Rashi's transliteration, we can see that in his, medieval form of French spoken in northern France, it was that last character was apparently pronounced, or, apparently modern French has dropped the pronunciation of a final syllable. And that French word descends etymologically from the Latin cicogna. To this day, in Italian, the word for stork is cicogna, and in Spanish, there's the equivalent cigüeña. This 900-year-old transcription of the word into Hebrew characters seems to capture that in the dialect of French spoken by Rashi, the pronunciation was closer to that of Portuguese. And I believe in Portuguese, the word for stork is pretty much cigogna as well. And now I'd like to move on to a third example, which I think is even more fun than the first two. Let me just turn the page. So I'm going to go to verse 21. Leviticus 11:21 is an interesting verse. There's Zachar Nayak pioneered the practice of polemicizing against it, saying that it contains a zoological error. It's unclear to some people what it's referring to precisely, but here's Rashi's attempt to use a French word from his time to clarify what the verse is referring to. So I'll once again put at the top of your screen in the standard Hebrew script what he transcribed. This is his transliteration of the French word for the type of creature that he felt Leviticus 11:21 was describing. Now, again, there's a little bit of a uncertainty about what exactly he was transliterating, because the wa could be pronounced as an o or a u, and the final aleph could be pronounced as a or an e. So this could be langosta, like in Spanish, or langusta, or even languste. So I'll just put on your screen the three possible transliterations of his transcription. Langosta, langusta, languste. Now, the modern French equivalent of that would clearly be langouste. Now, at first glance, this might seem like it's going to cover the same ground that was covered in the previous two examples. You might say, oh, well, the final syllable was dropped in modern French. It was pronounced in Rashi's time, with langusta, languste, while in modern French, it's langouste. But beyond that, this example is a bit more fun because it's initially a bit more weird, a bit more strange. Now, again, I'm not any sort of expert in French. I'm quite ignorant of French, but I at least know, at least from my perspective, that the word langouste means lobster. And that's weird, that's strange initially because of the context. Again, we were looking at Leviticus 11:21, which was talking about a certain kind of creature which can fly and which is also permissible to eat under the law of the Torah, under Mosaic law. So if the word that Rashi was transcribing, whether it's langusta or langosta or languste, if it's the equivalent of the French langouste, and langouste means lobster, it leaves you somewhat perplexed because you're left to wonder, wait a minute, was Rashi referring to some sort of flying kosher lobster? Because for those of you who don't know, lobster is clearly forbidden in Jewish law. And, one might even start to wonder, was Rashi crazy? But the answer is no. The issue here is the changing meaning of words, perhaps, or the semantic range of a word in the past once being much larger than its popular understanding, its popular semantic range. Now, I actually found an English edition of Rashi which gives further commentary. So Rashi was offering a commentary on the Torah, and then this English edition of Rashi offers some commentary on his commentary. So it's sort of like a meta-commentary. Rabbi Yisrael Isser Zvi Hercheg offered this commentary, this note on Rashi's commentary at Leviticus 11:21. Quote, "The English word locust is cognate with this word, and that was its meaning in Old French. However, in modern French, the word is spelled langouste and has come to mean crayfish," end quote. And there you see the source underneath. In short, Rashi wasn't trying to refer to a lobster, he was trying to refer to locust. Now, I found that to be a particularly fun example because it shows that we need commentaries to explain things because of the evolution of language and the evolution of different groups of people's understandings of various languages. So Rashi was dealing with a community that understood Hebrew. He was writing to them in Hebrew, but at the same time, they had lost their understanding of a number of Hebrew words and phrases, and therefore he would use French words, old French words, French from the 11th century, northern France, to elucidate some of those Hebrew words and phrases. However, now French has continued to evolve, and thus we need a commentary on the commentary. We need a meta-commentary to explain the commentary. The original commentary was meant to elucidate the Torah. That was Rashi's point. But now we need further commentaries on Rashi's commentary to elucidate Rashi's commentary. And I find that quite fascinating. And so that's it. I'll close here. I hope others found this interesting. I just wanted to share some things I found today while looking in the text. I thought these are some fun examples. As always, I look forward to the comments of others, and I'll close this video the same way I do every other. God bless.